And for our formal welcome to our virtual book club for this month. We are excited to have Kelly Knowles, the fabulous Kelly Knowles, facilitating us and talking about this relational intelligence book. And just for the recording, I'm going to do a brief intro of Kelly. It's always worth introducing our speaker, facilitator. So if you don't know, Kelly Knowles is passionate about igniting adult learning, nurturing individual potential, and empowering learners to overcome limitations and realize their true capabilities. With over 20 years in key training and development roles, she has driven transformative change across industries. She is also the force behind Kelly K Consulting, and she delivers keynote speeches, dynamic workshops, and coaching for individuals and teams. Her mission to inspire leaders at all levels to discover, develop, and embody their purpose-driven leadership and to know that they are here on purpose and for a purpose. So that is Kelly, and I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Karen Baird, our VP of Marketing and Communications for ATD Nashville Board. So excited to have you all here. And I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. And let me just do a shout out to Karen for all of her work. When you see posts and branding and all the things, Karen just makes it easy for the rest of us. So I want to publicly acknowledge her. So today we're going to talk about relational intelligence. And I'm very eager to have this discussion because I want to reset my attitude a little bit. But we have to start with, do you have a best book you've read this year? And um, given that, it doesn't have to be professional development. We don't have to be formal here in this intro time. What's one of the best books you've read this year? And throw it in the chat or feel free to come off mute and share the title.
I am reading. Oh, hello, I'm Lynette.
Hello. Hi, Lynette.
I am reading The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins.
Yes.
I can't get it to
Thank
show.
you. Yeah.
But my sorority actually held an international book club featuring this selection. And when I tell you, it has revolutionized my way of looking at life, including relationships. And for me, the theme this year seems to be relational intelligence, building my relationships within my various communities. And I almost needed to read this book before starting relational intelligence, because the let them theory allows me to let adults be adults and not feel compelled to help everyone slash enable people in my family or in my communities. And so I've learned a lot about how I interact with others and how I can have healthier interactions. So wonderful book. I highly recommend it to everyone.
Lynette, thank you. I've followed Mel for years and I'll keep all my opinions to myself, but that book is it's making the rounds, and I cannot begin to tell you how many people I've heard talk about that book. So thank you for sharing that. And I haven't read Seven Husbands yet. Dee, that's one that our book club has occasionally brought up. And be ready when the luck happens. Oh, okay. I got to save chat because I'm just a little bit of a wannabe book nerd. I have to share mine because I'm just gonna. And this book is a book that was written right after World War II. And it is a story of a woman who was a writer in New York, very typical New Yorker. She ends up in this pen pal, writing letters back and forth, hard copy, send things via post, with a bookshop manager in London. And there's so much about post World War II London. I didn't realize they were still in rations and they were still not able to have stockings. And so she would just send them hosiery, and it's just a delightful read because she's just a little snarky, but she develops this deep friendship with the gentleman in London. And so you can kind of get the American British style. By the way, the deluxe used signed first version is only $450. I bought the $14 version used, but if anybody you know was feeling extra generous, she did a follow-up where she finally made it to London and they recorded that book, which came out in the early 70s. Um, but it's just a absolute delight. Kiffin, game on. Kiffin says she has read more books already this year than all of last year.
Which
Um,
wasn't hard because I only read like 3 last year.
you don't have to tell that part. Just say, I have quadrupled my book reading. So thanks for that discussion. I just,
Yeah,
you know,
can I share
mhm,
something about the books though, Kelly? Do we have
yeah,
time?
go for it. Give us
So
about a
the
minute.
reason I can't decide which one to share, and I've read so many because I've been made intentional choices to read some fiction this year too. Like I'm very much into cozy mysteries, you know, like just fun, lighthearted mysteries. So I've read several of those. I've also read some business books. But also I've been on a health journey for a very long time, and that's a whole nother conversation. But 3 books that I'm sort of in process with that I thought I would mention. And I can put these in the chat if anybody's interested. But one is called Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die. I'm doing a lot of work around how like your body holds on to trauma and stuff. Um, One is called The Body Keeps the Score, and I'm blanking on the other one because I don't have it here. But anyway, so if you're interested in any of those, then let me know. But that's something that's been a really big part recently.
Kiffin, I need you to put a list in the chat, dude, so I can add it. I have kept an Excel spreadsheet for several years, and it just makes me feel so proud of myself when I can write down a book I've read. The Body Keeps the Score YouTube, there's a lady that actually did a summary of that book because I've been interested in knowing, is it my jam? And the summary was very helpful because I know it is a strong book and was just trying to make a decision, is that a book for me kind of thing. So thank you, Kiffin. So moving into our discussion today, I wanted to share a little bit about, who is this author? If you went to look for the book and find the book, and we're going to talk about it in a minute if you read the book, but I think you'll still get value from our discussion today. There is more than one book out there titled Relational Intelligence. So that's a bit of a challenge. Adam and I missed a meeting together. He's actually writing another book. And so he did reach out in a LinkedIn message to me. So thank you for tagging him in our announcement. And he just said, hey, thanks for featuring my book. And he has a consulting business in New York. He does get fairly vulnerable in this book about his life and his history and his background, which I thought was very interesting. And he does continue to work in his own consulting. I think the piece that hit for me is that he was with Korn Ferry for so long, and I get their newsletter. One day when I grow up, maybe they'll let me work for them, and I really like their content. So I thought it was interesting that he had been a partner at Korn Ferry for a period of years. So that's a little bit about who the author is. And then just to give us a definition, because I know I'm with all y'all smart people. What is relational intelligence? And this is how he defines it, is you successfully connect with people and build strong, long-lasting relationships. So that is how he defines relational intelligence. And he ties that, and by the way, this is not a lecture, I'm just giving us some intro. He ties that to 5 skills. And I would ask the question, feel free to disagree because I love critical thinking. Yeah, I believe all of these can apply to all the parts of our life. They can apply in our families. They can apply with, if we are having a conversation with the bug guy, we can have all kinds. This can just apply across the board. And it's that establishing rapport, understanding others, embracing individual differences, developing trust, and then cultivating influence. Would you agree with that? That these could apply across the board in all facets of our lives? What do you think?
I would say yes. I think the one that maybe would be different for people to think about it applying in like friendship or family relationships as cultivating influence. But if you think about it, friends and family members have influencing on each other. They may just not think about it in this formal way that we talk about all the time in business context. But I think that all of these apply in every area of life.
Thank you, Karen. And there's some differentiators in there as you indicated, but yeah. So first question, and Karen, I can't remember if we did this as a poll or we're just going to throw it in chat.
I have a poll,
Awesome.
so I will launch.
And if you've done ATD Book Club before, you know it's not a shame if you didn't read it because we can still learn and gain information. And you may decide you want to read it. You may decide that you don't.
So I think most of us have answered because some of us as host roles can't even answer. So I will go ahead and share the results there.
How about that?
We are both ends of the spectrum here.
I
All or
straight up, I'm
nothing.
impressed. Yeah, we had a shorter window on this book, so it's why I did my post that said, hey, this book's got a lot of things, but even if you only read a section, please come to the conversation. So thanks for that. So I have to channel the 1980s. I am from the 1900s. I need to work on my cultural references because I think I've already encountered people that don't know who Ferris Bueller is, and there's just a part of my heart that feels a little bit of pain there, and I'm just gonna have to get over it. So this is Mike Myers, who is very famous for his Jackie Wayne's World movies, and he played a character on SNL back in the 80s called Linda Richmond, and he did this whole coffee talk, and he would have famous people come on, and it was a fun little skit, and it didn't get too serious that my brain remembers, and he would say he was getting all verklempt, and he would have these long nails, as you can see, and he would say, let's discuss, go discuss, and he would give people a topic. So I have 12 topics, and given in the interest of time, I have to respect that we're not going to get to all of these, but I wanted to at least spur our conversation. And I also included the page numbers. So if you say, hey, what are they talking about there? Or I want to learn a little bit more about that. I also forced myself, and again, I'm a wannabe nerd. I'm never going to be smart enough to be a nerd, to like do myself a little personal index of all my notes. And so I've got a bigger index if there's something we need to look up. But feel free to throw in the chat the questions that seem most compelling to you, and we'll have a conversation. What's hitting?
I only had an opportunity to read the introduction, and that's where I saw bullies have high self-awareness. And that surprised me because I always assumed the opposite. But after reading his explanation, it makes complete sense. In order to intimidate or negatively influence someone else, you have to be very sensitive to their reactions and be very knowledgeable about how to push those buttons and those triggers. Um, so they know what they're doing and they're very
Lynette,
good at
Lynette picked question one. Ta-da! No, thank you.
it.
I remember, I read that and I was like, let me hold up for a moment. But in thinking about, I mean, we could have a whole discussion on what is bullying, what is not bullying. Somebody's probably going to get mad because it could get political. I mean, it's a whole thing. But if you think about it, what do you think about that statement as Lynette drew out for us? Thank you, Lynette. Bullies have high self-awareness.
Well, I'm one who did not read the book, so I'm just speaking off from my own thoughts. I would also be surprised if this is true, but I would think there's probably a piece of their own self-awareness that may be missing in terms of what is it? I feel like this is getting into like a therapy realm, but like what is it I really want and need? They could have high awareness of if I do this action, I'm going to get this reaction, and that's giving me something. But I would suspect there's something, greater degree of self-awareness missing as to like what are their own needs and why is it that they're doing the bullying and getting these reactions out of people?
And with both
Thank
of
you.
those in hand, too, you think about that the high self-awareness, and I will be honest, I don't even remember reading that in the beginning, but the concept of they're highly self-aware, but often bullies are bullying because of their own feeling of inadequacy or their, whatever on that end. So it's that they're aware that if they do this, then they feel less bad about whatever it is that is going on with them.
Thank you, Kiffin. He writes in the book, we later discovered bullies did in fact have high self-awareness, which enabled them, to your point, to manipulate situations and understand how to get a rise out of others. They also had a good understanding of others' underlying emotions, which I'm paraphrasing, helped them to find the right button to push on their targets. And so, this is where Kara and I love to use the phrase, it's not a either or, it can be a both and that's where my brain goes. Now, I do want to keep in mind our venue that we're, in our ATD training and organizational development and all the things space. And so if we think about this from, having intelligence around this and encountering this, whether we are, an actual leading an actual training, we're developing instructional materials, we're trying to influence someone around maybe thinking a different way of putting together materials and so on, this could be a great insight into what it maybe even motive. I don't know. I could be stretching that a little bit too far. What do y'all think? And I'm open to drop it and move to the next one. Just want to throw it out there.
Well, I'm just curious, Kelly, if you're thinking even within a training context, if you have a disruptive participant, that could be seen as some form of a bullying behavior. Um, the value of having an understanding of this is, could that help you as the trainer in that situation to address that and kind of bring control back to the space? Um,
Yeah. Especially if they know what potential reaction they're going to get. Um, it was unfortunate, but when I taught college for several years and I had a student who had been through some very difficult military combat experiences and was now on the GI Bill. At one point in the discussion, I don't remember what kind of class I was teaching, all kinds of business classes, he put a knife out on the table and in a way that was quite threatening. And I remember looking at him, and me and Jesus had to talk to be quite transparent. And then I looked at him and said, put it away now. And I'm so thankful that he put it away because I'm not sure what my next step would have been. But I found out later more about him. So bully is probably not the appropriate word, but he was intending on a specific type of reaction when he did that. So yeah. All right. What other questions are appealing, y'all? Oh.
I was really struck by some of his claims on the early life motivational forces section and would like for
Yes.
us to kind of dive into some of that part. I know that not everyone had a chance to read the book or may not have gotten to that section. Um, I will admit and put it out there that I had some problems with this book, including some of the claims that it made and the science that was marshaled in support of his arguments. So some of the early life motivational forces, it seems like one of his suggestions, his kind of how we put this into practice, he came back to this at least twice in the book, was to do 3 hour long behavioral psychoanalytic interviews of new leaders, potentially even at the interview stage, and to draw up things from someone's childhood.
Yeah.
And I felt like that really contradicted some of his earlier and later points about inclusion and diversity in the workforces, and also really big ethical concerns about like if someone were to divulge in that space, it's like, hey, one of the big influences on me was that I was abused as a child. Does that then go in that employee's record? Like if they say that, oh, well, my parents spent time in jail, does that then become a mark against them? And our own biases of the employer come into play.
Danny, you've just articulated what I couldn't. Thank you. Because I would read something and I'd be like, yeah, I'm getting this. And then I'd read something else. I'm like, and I'm not an org dev, org psychology academic at all. And there was times when I had, for lack of a better way to put it, a cognitive dissonance about what I read and then what I just read. So thank you for articulating that beautifully for us. And I always want to read a book and not immediately go meh. I mean, I think as individuals, I know if you've spent any time with me, I do have fairly strong opinions, and I struggle with this book as well because I started out optimistic. It'd been on my Amazon wish list for ages. As a matter of fact, the author said, "How'd you find out about the book?" And I said, "I don't remember. It's been on my wish list, and my kid bought it for me." But there were times, and then also thinking about. I think Kiffin put in the chat, is that meant to hurt me? What needs to be covered in the context of this business discussion? And do I need to go into all my mother's trauma? I mean, we might be able to speak to what may inform, like as a first generation professional, I know that my working class background has informed and influenced my early career and my current career. And that is close to my heart because I know the impact on it. But that doesn't mean that's the whole story. And by the way, being working class does not mean trauma. Let's not put those two together. So, yeah, I appreciate what you're saying there. And somebody else, what else do you all think about this early life motivational forces? It does make me think, one more comment and I'll shut up. I did love how Carol Dweck addressed it in her book Mindset. And I don't know what you all thought about that book, but how kids were rewarded for certain things I see that. I see that now in people I've coached and in my own life. So anybody else on that early life motivational forces? And I did put the page number where that was first mentioned, if it's helpful.
This is where having the audible version and not the paper version is real hard.
It's the family relationships section, if that's, yeah. It talks about how when parents are strong models, Kiffin, how they can inspire their kids to be everything. I've seen that work the other way. And when a family is dysfunctional, it can damage a person. And positive or negative early life experiences can be the motivational forces for change. Is the piece that I highlighted.
I think it's really great that you pull in Carol Dweck's work here and we think about the additional research that's been done over the last 10, 15 years on the marshmallow experiment. Some of you may be familiar with the marshmallow experiment that they did back, I believe it was the 1960s, perhaps the 70s, where they would take a marshmallow and put it in front of a child and say, if you don't eat this, I'll give you 2 marshmallows. But I'm going to step out of the room. And some kids that are seen as having low impulse control and therefore doomed to failure later in life ate the marshmallow quickly. But when they've gone back and looked at this from more of a diversity perspective and kind of more of a, like, what else is going on in a broader cultural context, there's also the element of, is there part of their society that rewards acting quickly and acting now because maybe that payoff isn't there for them later?
Yeah.
And so for those children that choose to eat the marshmallow now, is it because they learned, I can't necessarily trust that the grown-up in my life or this other person that I don't know, this researcher, will actually come through and reward me with 2 later?
Danny, thank you for adding that context. That recently went viral again, I think, in so many different forms with M&Ms. I've seen something lately where the adult will give the 2 kids, one kid gets the ice cream and the other kid gets like a carrot or whatever. And but you just made a really interesting point in terms of if you perhaps grew up in a place where you're like, yeah, I can hold out because I know there's going to be marshmallows in my life. Where others, maybe this may be the only time they've got one, and I better get a hold of it now. And that's an interesting differentiator.
And I'll also
Yeah.
throw out I have a 6-year-old, and if you put anything in front of her, she has actually a abundance mindset, if we want to kind of frame these in terms of mindset. And she's like, I know I can eat this now, enjoy this now, and later in the future, I will get more marshmallows. And I'm perfectly content with that. Like, mom's going to make sure I'm well fed after this science experiment that I'm part of. And so
Yes.
there's so much at play here where we can't boil things down neatly into someone is doomed based on this decision to eat a marshmallow or not. Similarly, just to go on a slightly different note, it talks about in part of these chapters, Kiffin, I'm going to explain this too, because I know I also listened to the audiobook version. I've got the Kindle version in front of me too, so I'm going back and forth. But he talks about the twin studies and how there's a gene that may be related to leadership. And I really struggle with studies that kind of promote ideas of genetic determinism, ideas where your genes decide if you're going to be a leader. We've had these for a long time. I mean, this is the basis of eugenics.
Yeah.
Of yes, Lynette, as I'm hearing this, I'm like, there are problems here. And when that was juxtaposed with his comments on kind of really about DEI, there was such a disconnect. All of his practical applications were undermined, and like they just didn't coalesce with what he's saying there.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts around the early life motivational forces? Uh, yeah, I have never believed that leadership is only innate. Again, not being a scientist or any kind of that type of person, I've always believed that you can improve and continue to grow and learn. And I've witnessed it in my personal life. I've witnessed it with my spouse. Some of us just didn't get developed much when we were little, but that does not stop our ability to continue to develop. And my husband didn't read his first book until he was in his 20s, and I'm not sharing a secret. Where for me, it was like, give me a book, teach me to read, get me to school. And so if you talk to him at some point and ask, what are you reading? I've never read a book. Well, does that determine? No, absolutely not. And so it's a development, completely random. But if we think about learning instructional methodologies, a girlfriend of mine many years ago said, buy me Kindle. And this is when Kindles first came out. I said, I don't want to spend the money. She said, I'll get you one on eBay. She got him this old Kindle on eBay, and the man reads more than I do. And he didn't like the physical activity of holding a book. He builds cabinets all day. He's tired when he gets home. Holding a book wears him out. And so for him, a Kindle was exactly what he needed. And he consumes books. Now, he and I consume different genres, and he ruins my Amazon suggestions and our library suggestions. But that wasn't something that people thought about in the past, is that it was always hold this physical heavy book and figure out how to turn pages. And again, if you weren't read to as a child, how do you understand that concept? But that doesn't limit you necessarily. It might slow you down a little bit. What's our next topic, unless there's something in that one that we need to continue with?
I'm curious if people had ideas, I don't know what he says, about the we are all selling. So I'll just be very transparent and honest as I am. Part of me like was not as interested in reading this book, not because I'm perfect at relational intelligence. I won't say I'm perfect, but I have built a lot of skills in relating to people over my life. It is something I think comes somewhat naturally to me, and I've worked at it. So a part of me was like, am I going to learn something new? But what I'm interested in hearing what you thought about the we are all selling part is when it comes to things like networking, building, whether it's for a business or building relationships, the thing that I always hear people saying is networking feels icky, right? Like it doesn't feel genuine to make a connection with people. I have met a friend here in San Antonio that she has built this amazing community, 1,500 people of moms who also own businesses. She came from the corporate world and she's like, I will not call it networking. We are building community. And I just chuckle because it's like they're the same thing. It's just you're looking at it with a different lens, but I understand why to some people the idea of networking it feels icky and genuine, like you're selling yourself. So I'd be curious to hear what people think about that. We are all selling and what he had to say about that piece.
So Karen, when I was finishing up my notes last night and I'd already finished the PowerPoint and I was tired and I had a meeting to go to, I realized that I did not include questions about networking. So I almost started over and then I was like, no, you're not. No, it will come out. If it needs to be talked about, it will come out. And networking was a big chunk. There were several pieces of this book where networking is addressed. I actually wrote the statement, we are all selling, just to be a little, I was just kind of curious what would happen if I put it out there. But he does say on page 17 that it's not about what you're selling. It is about the experience you create for people. And then he talks about customer satisfaction in 4 unique areas and so on. I would offer that at our in the core a lot is sometimes we are selling. People will immediately size us up based on how we look, based on how we speak, based on how we present, based on how we show up. And you may not convert that to selling, but at the same time, I think often people who are not bringing in the money, they're not the fee earners. Some people would negatively call them fee burners. They forget their value add. So that's the piece that maybe my brain was going to, is that you may not have actual dollars coming into your organization, but you can absolutely add value that impacts those dollars. And your relational intelligence could potentially impact that. I don't know if that's stretching a little too far, but we can also talk about the networking piece if anybody had anything around that.
Even I feel like even people who are in sales roles that are the most successful know that it is not about the product or service that they're selling. It's about the relationships that they build and the problems that they solve for the customers. So I think that's so true. I mean, we're selling ourselves from the point of making new friends, like literally like neighbors being friendly, you're selling like I'm a great neighbor, I promise, to your business, to whatever. And so I think if we think about that, literally even people who are in a sales position, it's not just about selling, but that then those of us who have nothing to do with selling potentially, in name, are still selling in one way or another. I think it's a really good comment, Kelly, because that's it's just true. We are always trying to promote something. Hopefully we're doing it with good intention and in a both and, not just a how can I help myself, but how can I help you kind of mentality.
Yeah. And that's where I just saw a comment from Shelley. Thank you, Kiffin, that transactional, are you looking at just having this transaction? And some days it may feel that way. I give you money, you wash my car. But there is, and some of us aren't, that's all we want. That's it. And then others, we want to know, to use a Southern phrase, about your mom and them, or how was your day? There is a comedian, and she was talking the other day about moving to Nashville from California, and she's in TJ Maxx. Her whole bit's kind of funny, but she's talking about people ask about you and then they want to talk about the weather. And she's like, I don't know if I have the energy to live here, and so I think we do have to be mindful of our own personalities and our own styles, and not let that lead into I have to be a certain person in order for us to have XYZ. I think that's where the concept of authenticity, which Danny, I did like a lot of what he said around authenticity, because it's something that is this moving target, but maybe it's just because it's kind of a call of my heart. But I didn't quite find as much dissonance there sometimes. All right, I want to be mindful of our time. What is another topic. And if we're moving too fast, you guys let me know.
I'm curious about what the book had to say about culture. What about class? As I stated, I haven't read it, but I'm really curious about that particular topic.
Okay, Lynette, I may have gotten opinionated again on that one because he talks a lot about, so bad, Kelly. He says on page 75 that just because people come from the same cultural heritage does not mean they will view it in the same way. And he talks later about cultural diversity is the representation in one social system of people with distinctly different group affiliations of cultural significance. And he goes into this framework of values, beliefs, norms, and so on. I think, again, sometimes I read this a little bit too much about me and not try to be more objective. I think there's a lot about that has been discussed around culture, and I would offer that you could come from this similar culture, but I do think class can come into play. And and I'm not saying that yeah, class is not mentioned. Thank you, Danny. But that's the piece that I had a question about. He's doing all this about culture, 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 culture. And I'm like, what about class? And I think it's because my own personal view in America is that we still have a class system, not necessarily the others. But again, that's Kelly's personal view. What are y'all thinking?
Kelly, I would echo a lot of your points here. And as I put in the chat, like class was not mentioned at all. And one of the issues that I took with the book when it was talking about culture is it created very large buckets to drop people into. And especially when it was talking about the case with Sergio, and he went to Europe, and there were managers from France and Italy and Germany, and it just painted cultures with very broad strokes of like Germans talk this way, Italians manage this way. And I struggled with that depiction of individuals as they're working in places. There's a lot more to people than just one element of their cultural upbringing. There's so many parts to a culture that are not addressed here.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Lynette, does that speak to your question a little bit?
Yes, it
Okay.
does.
Yeah. I was just putting my own opinion out there. I'm sorry. I was
Do
just
not
like,
apologize for that. No, no, because I
I'm
definitely believe.
opinionated when I read. I know you're shocked. Yeah.
No, I firmly believe that America has a caste system, and after reading the book Caste,
Mm.
race is definitely a part of our caste system here in the U.S. So I was wondering if you touched on that at all, the intersectionality, as Shelley pointed out in the chat.
Lynette, there's, different people have different bents and areas of interest. There were two sections of the book that were difficult for me. One was the embracing individual differences, because I struggle between you're you and I'm me. And how does that fit with me getting to keep my values? And so, when there's that embracing, what do you mean by embracing? Do I got to go your way in order for us to be friends? And, I grew up in an age when we could be completely opposite and hang out together. And it's just things are different now. So that section was difficult for me. And then the section on, it may have been the last one, romantic relationships and marriage was also a difficult, and I've been married 21 years, but there was just two lines in there I remember highlighting. So I would invite you to read that section, and would love to have a conversation with you later if you're game to see what you think. I don't know if anyone else had any input around that.
Dee, were you wanting to say something? I know you came on camera and I didn't know if you were gonna chime in or. Okay. Just want to make
He's
sure.
like, I'm not talking to you. Um,
Oh, I'm just not able to talk very much. I'm outside and it's kind of busy here.
I'm just playing. I apologize. Um, all right, let's do one more question, and then I've got two kind of wrap-up questions for us. And if you say, Kelly, you didn't hit on this, and I want to, let's do it. I like what Karen put in the chat. One thing I think about embracing is allowing space, even if someone else has a different value, perspective, opinion that belongs to them and my own, and it does not have to be threatened by the existence of the other. So there's some food for thought there.
Kelly, what's the 3-column feedback?
I'm so glad you asked.
You're
Sorry.
welcome.
I had a moment there. So I have a client who is really struggling with this. They have a lot of new managers, and it's they're trying to figure out, how do we do feedback. So we're putting together some programming for this fall on receiving feedback and getting feedback, two different things, as well as giving feedback. And so the book talks about something that this guy does, that he, or it may have been a she, that they wanted to figure out. It's on page 48 and 49. So that page number is a little bit off. So he brings people in a room. He draws 3 columns on a whiteboard. Column 1 focuses on what is people like about him. What's he doing well? Column 2 is about the things he does that drives people nuts. Where can he get better? And then column 3 focuses on ways he can be more supportive. What are others not getting from him that prevents them from reaching their full potential? He sets the columns up and then leaves the room. And it just hit me. And he's speaking to, helping to be aware of kind of that, what is that window theory where you've got a blind spot, you don't know what it is. I know y'all will use the right words, but I just liked the practicality and simplicity of that, Kiffin. Now you've got to have built a team and a relationship where they know it's safe and they know you're going to act on the feedback and so on. But I just loved the simplicity of putting that out there, especially if you are just trying to figure out a little bit around what's going on and how things are going with you and your people. Thoughts on that, y'all?
You have to be very secure. I'm sorry, Karen.
But no, you go ahead, Lynette.
No, quick statement. You have to be very secure in yourself in order to be able to do that, as well as have that relationship with those that you work with. Your relationship with yourself better be solid.
Well, and I would offer that maybe it's not, hey, we don't like it when you wear pink or whatever, but kind of giving those guidelines, what do we want to focus on for this? So somebody else may say, yeah, that's a terrible way to do it. I liked the simplicity and the practicality of it. There is something I heard one time for married couples, that you ask your significant other, what is something that I could do better for you? And I remember asking my husband that. He's like, what are you talking about? Where are we going with this? And I was like, you're not answering the question right. You're not and so I think it's how you set it up as well. Kiffin, does that help?
Yeah, and with my previous team, when I was internal, it's interesting because I'm questioning, did I really read this book now? But in my one-on-ones, I part of my format for my one-on-ones is I asked where they needed me to back off and let them handle it better, like more on their own. Where did they need me to lean in and support them more? And what did they need me to keep doing that made them feel supported and all? And so it's interesting that that's kind of the 3. But when I changed to that format, my one-on-ones with my direct reports changed completely.
Thank you. And I'm going to be stingy and ask if you're willing to throw that in the chat. And if you're like, no, that's my intellectual property, I want to respect that. But uh,
Yeah.
I was just like, man, I'm down.
Yeah,
Danny, you
yeah,
had
yeah.
something to say. Thanks, Kiffin.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
And Karen, did I miss anything from you? I'm so sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. Well, I was gonna try not to dig too deeply into my own neuroses, but something so simply about how you described, maybe this was in the book or maybe you just added this on, but the idea of asking someone, what am I doing that's driving you crazy? Um, I didn't touch the where were you rewarded when you were young because I'm currently working through that through therapy, but I am a high performer. I was rewarded by performance, by being good, by being academically achieving, blah, blah, blah. That means my bar for myself is very high. So the connection is when I receive constructive feedback, I'm immediately like, something's wrong with me, how terrible I am, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm gonna go cry in the dirt now, right? What I liked about how you framed it is the fact that we can have behaviors that there's no morality around them. They may not be right or wrong, but in the situation, that behavior or that way of being may not work for like if you're leading a team or you're in a group or something. So I really like how that the framing of that is like, it's not about that person like something, they're a terrible person, but maybe they're doing a behavior that just isn't working for the team that they're with and like providing the opportunity for them to even like kind of lighthearted, like, yeah, this is my pet peeve, or like this really drives me up the wall. It sort of adds, I feel like a little bit of levity to that. Like, okay, like now I'm empowered to change how I'm behaving in this situation because I know like what this team needs. And that feels like a much lighter process. I'm just like gonna really think about that for myself too. But that's, thanks for following me on this little rabbit trail. But that's kind of what I was thinking when you described that process.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the things I also think about is um, not letting certain things be a define you for life. And okay, it was this, and now we're here. It's my family has discovered that, I've got kind of a mini lemon thing going on in my kitchen, and my last gifts have been nothing but lemon stuff. And I looked at my husband the other day and said, how do we get the word out? I'm done. I'm not a tchotchke person. I don't like a bunch of stuff. I just wanted a little bit of a lemon theme for my yellow kitchen, but I don't need like lemon. I don't want all things lemon, if you get my drift. And so it's one of those where, my mother would say, well, you always liked, no, mom, I liked it in 8th grade, and kind of making those differentiators. And that could be the same at work. And it's especially difficult when you find yourself developing in your workplace because people will put you in a box and then you're not in that box anymore. And they don't quite know what to do with you. So I've got 2 questions for you as we start to wrap up. Um, I love the conversation we've had. I was really curious where we were going to go with this book because, man, he's all over the place. Um, Greatest takeaway and or biggest critique. Speaking of yellow, what do you think? Oh, please don't hold back on me. I got to
I'll
hear it.
I'll go since somebody else is. I'm going to keep it really basic and general, but the whole thought of, when we think of relational intelligence, emotional intelligence, whatever word with intelligence, it's to me, it's a bottom line about awareness and intentionality. So if we know that so many things impact us, our childhood experiences, all the things, then just really keeping an awareness about relationships and differences and all is such a vital piece. I mean, I know that's really super simple, but that's kind of, it was just really a reminder that this is important.
Thank you. Thanks, Kiffin. And, I, having not had a lot of that academic background, I've gotten a lot of mine just grassroots and through experience and so on. I'm a business management major, so it's a little bit different what I was exposed to. Um, a lot of the terminology I had to kind of break down and think, okay, where are we talking EI, EQ, RI, and then he goes into these, and the four theories of such and such. And once I start that rabbit trail, he's given me four more theories. And that was just a bit of a whoop for me. I needed a little bit more of I think it's because of his background and his academic background and his experiences. Someone else could read that, just be tracking right along and knowing what he's at. Anybody else, a greatest takeaway or a biggest critique?
Kelly, I want you to be a little bit kinder on yourself with your assessment of going through that section. I'm very familiar with the terms that he threw in the sections about EQ and all of those. And what I realized is that he wasn't actually making a point with a lot of it. I'm sorry for coming off so harshly on this book.
No.
But in that section, there was a lot of kind of very like there was theory that was being mentioned, but it was actually circuitous logic in most of his sentences where it was empty claims. And then it wasn't tied clearly to his, like, this is what you need to do actions. So if that section was difficult for you, that's okay. I went back and reread the section on my Kindle after listening to it on Audible because I was like, this didn't feel like it felt like it should have had something that it didn't.
Thank you. Yeah, I love how you said circuitous because I thought, where's he going? He took me here and now we're going here. And as somebody who thinks and talks that way all the time, I mean, I could have 20 conversations with you in an hour. I can usually track along. And yet this one, where are we going? What's my point? What's our end goal? And so thank you for bringing that out. Yeah, I agree with Karen in terms of appreciating your insights and your critiques and looking at it from that technical science-based assessment. I think I won't speak for anybody else, but I'm a super fan of yours since hearing you a couple years ago. I'm just like, she's going to think I'm a stalker because I think she's pretty awesome. All right, Shelley, it's good to see you. Let's look at our closing poll. And are we doing this in the chat, Karen? Is that how we're doing this one?
Yeah, or people can come off mute.
Okay, awesome.
So was this existing information repackaged or did you find it fresh? Something else? Danny, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, I realize I am on recording when I'm saying this, so please recognize this. This represents my own view and nothing about any organization I work for or have worked for. I found this to be a jumble of ideas where some of it was things that I heard repackaged, but good information that like we should aspire to about, bringing like thinking about culture, thinking about what people's backgrounds are. But it was actually repurposing some problematic business behaviors that have been around for a long time. His section on interviewing and how you can get a sense of someone in the first 5 minutes that is deeply problematic to what we know about effective, diverse hiring practices. We are more likely to lean into our cultural biases when we rely on the first 5 minute knee-jerk reaction. And so I was uncomfortable with a lot of this book in its practical application. And my biggest takeaway in reading this was it further committed me to more equitable hiring practices and knowing that I want my team and I want any organization I work for to be one that really values the individual in front of me and to know that the person that I hire is going to continue to evolve and change over the course of the time that they're with me. And I too, as a leader, should continue to evolve and change and grow.
Danny, did you read my notes? Because it's a little scary. In the marriage section, there was one line that I read Sunday morning, and it said, you have to be willing to change, evolve, and grow together. And I think that could translate in a lot of places. Now, again, not necessarily compromise your values. Don't compromise your values. That's important. But, you know, if you're in those relationships, are we willing to evolve? Are we willing to grow together? Is there a willingness to have some change? So it sounds like you were kind of tagging in on that as well. We do not have time for this, but I had a question for the chat, and it was fun seeing the responses I got on Facebook. I just threw it out on Facebook. Why y'all read? And I was waiting for one lady I know that whenever I bring up reading, she's like, you know, I don't read. Stop talking about books around me. And I was so disappointed that she didn't put anything in there. But, you know, Facebook and their algorithms, and I rarely post. But I love the responses, and the top responses were to learn, to be entertained, and to escape. And so I thought, well, that kind of tags into a lot of things. So I'm going to turn it back over. Thank you all for this discussion today so very much. And I'm going to turn it back to our illustrious